After the Los Angeles Chargers just lost to the Houston Texans 32-12 in the wild card round of the NFL playoffs in a game where Justin Herbert threw 4 interceptions against the Houston Texans, and I think I'm ready to have a conversation about Justin Herbert. And as a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I'm a little biased in my perspective of Justin Herbert, of course, but look, when it comes down to it, you have a quarterback that has been talked up like one of the 5 or 6 best young quarterbacks in all of the NFL. This was year 5 for him in the NFL, and his second career playoff game in which the Chargers lost in embarrassing fashion. And also, really, you could say this was his third playoff game because in 2022, in Week 18 of the NFL season, the Chargers had a chance to beat the Las Vegas Raiders for that final playoff spot in the 2022 NFL playoffs, in which the Raiders beat the Los Angeles Chargers by a final score of 35-32. And it feels like everyone has already forgotten about that game as well when it comes to Justin Herbert. And Justin Herbert threw the ball 64 times in that game and also had an interception. But nonetheless, the NFL community seems to constantly protect Justin Herbert when it comes to quarterback discourse and discussing whether or not he's the guy. And I want to preface this video by saying, even though I've already talked for a minute, by saying that, I don't think the Chargers need to do anything rash and make a quarterback change. And I'm not saying they need to get rid of Justin Herbert. Nothing like that. Nothing crazy. But I think it's time to have a conversation about whether or not he's the guy to get you over the hump. And there's a few reasons that I say that. Yes, Justin Herbert is extremely talented. He has great arm strength. He has good accuracy. He's a physical specimen. He's the prototypical franchise quarterback that you would want, has all the traits. He's a great player, and he's dug the Chargers out of this hole where they were just kind of a laughing stock in the AFC West for so many years before he came along, and, good for him. But what I don't understand is the Justin Herbert apologists on social media that never have a bad thing to say about him. It's never his fault. It's always the offensive line. It's always the wide receivers. It's always the defense. It's always someone else other than Justin Herbert. And I'm not saying all these playoff losses are completely on him, but he does take a large part of the blame. I mean, he's the quarterback. The quarterback is always going to play an extremely large portion in determining whether or not your football team wins the game. And in Justin Herbert's 2 career playoff games to this point, here are the facts. He is 0-2 in playoff games, including a game in which he was up 27-0 over the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they lost. And Justin Herbert in those 2 games has thrown a combined 4 interceptions, despite the fact that his defense has forced 8 turnovers combined in those 2 playoff games. If your defense forces 8 turnovers in the span of 2 playoff games, and you manage to lose both of them and throw 4 interceptions, yes, you are part of the problem. Yes, you are to blame. And we can go back to that Jaguars versus Chargers playoff game, a game in which Justin Herbert seemed to get no blame, and it was all on his defense, again, despite the fact that they forced several turnovers. But the Chargers failed to score a touchdown in the second half of that game. And look, I get it. Your team has weaknesses, but as the starting quarterback and the leader of that offense, you got to find a way to put that game away in the second half. You just do. And Justin Herbert failed to do that in that Jaguars playoff game. And in this game against the Houston Texans, in which they lost, yes, there was one interception in particular that he threw in which it was off the hands of the wide receiver. But you can't explain away all the other interceptions that he threw. You can't explain away or hide the fact that Justin Herbert made some inexplicable decisions in that football game. And yet there always seems to be a portion of NFL Twitter that is rushing to Justin Herbert's defense anytime he loses a big game. But to this point in his career, Justin Herbert is a .500 quarterback with no playoff wins, and he has a bunch of highlight plays, and that's cool, but where are the results? When are the results going to come? Because they have to come at some point. And at some point in your career, you have to win a playoff game. And I know it almost seems a little unfair to be saying all this because he still is pretty young, and he's only been in the league for 5 years. And, as a Chiefs fan and having Patrick Mahomes as our quarterback, success just feels like it should come a little bit quicker than that when you think you found a franchise quarterback. But also, I think if you just look at the rest of the NFL. Look at the Bills and Josh Allen. Look at the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow. Like, those guys have won playoff games to this point already. And even Joe Burrow, you could say he walked into maybe the worst situation of any rookie quarterback, out of those guys when they were rookies. And he's found a way to make the playoffs and win a playoff game multiple times. And even this year, they were just inches away from making the postseason yet again with a historically bad Bengals defense. And so I'll say this about Justin Herbert. Again, Patrick Mahomes is my quarterback, so maybe it's an unfair comparison. But I remember when Patrick Mahomes first started in 2018. That was his first year starting at quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. They had an all-time terrible defense. And yet Mahomes found a way to drag that team to the playoffs. And all these great quarterbacks are dealing with weaknesses on their team. And, there's always jokes about Justin Herbert being if man, if this, if that. But, it's true. It's always if the offensive line was this and if the wide receivers were that. And it just feels ridiculous. Like, at some point, some of the blame has to go on Justin Herbert. Like, he's never going to have absolutely perfect wide receivers, offensive line, and defense. It's just never going to be that way. All these teams have weaknesses, but great quarterbacks find a way to overcome those weaknesses. Some quarterbacks are just winners. And to me, it doesn't feel like Justin Herbert is a winner. I think he's very talented. Again, he has the traits. He makes a lot of highlight plays, but I don't think he's a winner. I don't think he's a winning quarterback. Everyone dunked on Emmanuel Acho a couple years ago when he called Justin Herbert a social media quarterback because he makes highlight plays, but you don't see the results. There's no substance to all of it. But to this point, he's been right. When is Justin Herbert ever going to take a mediocre Chargers team and overachieve with them and elevate them to being a winning team? If you have a true franchise quarterback and a guy that you give the keys to the organization, they should be able to elevate the team. And it feels like at this point, we've accepted that Justin Herbert can't elevate the team around him. So we have to surround Justin Herbert with the right amount of talent to make it work. And that doesn't feel like a great endorsement of your franchise quarterback. And I don't know if Chargers fans and Justin Herbert apologists have realized that this is where we're approaching, that we're kind of lowering the standard and making every possible excuse in the book to defend Justin Herbert after these horrific playoff losses. You just shouldn't look as uncompetitive in a playoff game as Justin Herbert and the Chargers looked against the Houston Texans if you're that guy. I'm not seeing the it factor. I'm not seeing that Justin Herbert is that guy. At some point, you got to overcome a subpar wide receiver core. Mahomes did it last year, won a Super Bowl. At some point, you have to overcome having a lackluster defense. Mahomes did it. Joe Burrow almost did it this past season. Lamar Jackson even has had faults within that Ravens team to deal with and has managed to win at least one playoff game. Even if his overall playoff resume is disappointing, his playoff resume, if you gave that to Justin Herbert instead, it feels like people would be calling that a massive success for Justin Herbert. But once again, the standard has just been lowered for this guy that we just treat like he's the Messiah and that he can do no wrong. We have to blame everyone else before we can talk about Justin Herbert. And all I'm saying is that I think it's time we start to have those uncomfortable conversations about whether or not he can get it done. So I'll emphasize once again, I'm not saying the Chargers need to make a change at quarterback. I'm not saying anything like that. Justin Herbert will get another opportunity to win a playoff game, but man, if he doesn't win that next one, we're going to be right back here the next year, and the conversations are going to get even more uncomfortable. But I'm here to say that his clock is ticking. His clock has started. At some point, you have to win a playoff game. You have to will your team to a win in the postseason. Just one time, man. You've been in the league long enough now. The team has changed head coaches. They've brought in new players. They drafted franchise offensive tackles. At some point, you got to get it done. So I'm going to wrap up the conversation there. Just getting it started. I'm sure you guys will have a lot to say in the comments. Some will agree, some will disagree, but I know where I stand with Justin Herbert, so I'll be curious to hear from you guys, but that's all I got for this one. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more people can find this. You can check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com for more. Follow me on Twitter at ShowMeFB, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.